For some reason, our mini disc ain't working here tonight, so we are just going to skip the intro as we are joined tonight by a very special guest. You remember Jesse Meade, who was here with us last semester. Jesse, can you hear us?
Of course I can. Things always go well at WRMU, you know. Glad to be here, though. It's been quite some time since I've got to have my voice out on the radio airwaves.
Yes, it has been a while as Jesse is joining us tonight because this is our bracket show here tonight as March Madness is underway. As we have had a few games already finished here this afternoon, we got our brackets in yesterday. Games that have gone final today are Syracuse winning UNC Asheville, Kansas State beating Southern Miss, Vanderbilt beating Harvard, Wisconsin beating Montana, New Mexico beating Long Beach State, Louisville beating Davidson, Murray State beating Colorado State, and Marquette beating BYU. But since we have already made our picks, we are going to go through region by region, the five of us with Jesse here.
I'd like to point out that I got all those right because I'm a genius. Yeah.
I've only missed one, so
Billy, we need to take a timeout here before we get into the bracket because you promised a very special segment for this show that revolved a certain sport that is a heritage of the Mexican culture.
Okay, Jesse, you're going to laugh at this one, but
Right.
Steve was so impressed by it, he wanted to bring it up for real quick at the start of the show.
Well, our host Billy Hassinger, a few weeks ago, last week. Sorry, Billy. Jeez, want me to tell the story or not? So Billy goes on a trip to Puerto Rico through the school, and he ends up getting himself into a Mexican hat dancing contest. And did he fail miserably? No. Billy won the Mexican hat dancing competition. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, that should be our cheer of the week. If the mini disc were working right now, I would want loud applause. You know what? I'm going to make my own. Woo! Cheer of the week.
Congratulations, Billy.
Congratulations, Billy.
Mexican hat dancing champion.
Yeah, it was pretty funny. It was a fun time.
You're officially the greatest Mexican hat dancer on Raiders Zone Weekly.
And only.
I prayed.
Okay.
I prayed.
But here's how things are going to work here tonight since Steve got that out of his system. Each of us, we're going to start in the West region where Michigan State is the number 1 seed, work our way backwards from the number 4 overall 1 seed, work our way up to Kentucky's region. As each one of us is going to go through our entire region before the next person goes. So, for instance, we're going to let Ryan start off with the Michigan State region. He's going to go through his second round games, which are currently going on and everything, go through the third round, regional semis, and the regional finals, and to say who his regional champ is going to be. So, Ryan, why don't you get us started?
All right, Billy. Sounds good. So, starting off, we have Michigan State against Long Island. And for that one, I have Michigan State coming off, 116, obviously. The second game is Memphis against St. Louis, the 8-9 matchup. And that one, I have St. Louis and Coach Rick Majerus pulling off the upset, if you want to call it that. The next game is New Mexico and Long Beach State. I had Long Beach State in that one, but New Mexico did, in fact, prevail earlier today. The next matchup is the 4-13 with Louisville and Davidson. Louisville did, in fact, win that game earlier as well. Then we have the 6-11 matchup, which is Murray State, Colorado State. And Murray State won that one 58-41. And then we have the 3-14 matchup, which is Marquette and BYU. And Marquette dominated that one with a 20-point win earlier today. So Murray State and Marquette will play. The 7-10 matchup is Florida-Virginia. I have Florida winning in that one as the 7 over the 10. And the 2-15 to round out that region is Missouri against Norfolk State. And I have Mizzou coming off that one as well.
All right, so there's your second round matchups for Ryan and the West region. Why don't you go ahead and take us through your third round matchups, Ryan?
All right, so I have Michigan State taking on St. Louis. I have the Spartans winning that one. They're a tough team, good 1 seed. I had Long Beach State against Louisville, and I still had Louisville winning that one, so I'm still alive there, thank the good Lord. Then I have Murray State and Marquette. I have Murray State pulling off the upset. The Racers only had 1 loss. I just don't think they got enough respect throughout the season, so I gave them that one. And then in Florida-Mizzou, I've got the Tigers winning that one and going to the Elite Eight. Sweet 16, sorry.
And your matchups from the Sweet 16 and your victors?
All right, so that leaves me with Michigan State and Louisville. I have Michigan State winning that one as a 1 seed going straight to the Elite Eight. And in the Murray State-Mizzou matchup, I have Mizzou winning that one. So in my Final Four matchup, it's Michigan State against Mizzou, and I have Missouri coming out of that one with a 2-over-1 upset going to the Final Four.
Pretty good region with Missouri winning it. Steve, why don't you take us through your West region?
I surely will. Just a quick preface to how I made these picks. Those of you who listened last year, I actually did my picks. I called it the Heartless Bracket. Basically, I just went through and statistically picked whatever seed was most likely to win in each round. I ended up having 4 number 2 seeds in the Final Four, which didn't work out too well for me, so I did terrible. So this year I decided to base it on the Vegas odds because I figured that if you're setting odds in Vegas, then you have the most invested out of anyone else. So I pretty much went, I picked whoever was most likely to win according to the Vegas odds, but I kind of tweaked it here and there, so it's not entirely that. So it's not nearly as pure as last year, but either way, here it goes. So first round, I've got in the 1 versus 16, I've got Michigan State over Long Island University Brooklyn. Then I've got Memphis in the 8-9 matchup over St. Louis. I picked Long Beach State over New Mexico. One of my losses here in the second round. It's not the second round; it's the first round. That's a ridiculous title. Let's get real.
Talk about that for a second. That's a completely ridiculous creation that's come up here in the last couple of years.
It is. The first round that they call the first round is a playing game. They're playing games. It's ridiculous.
Now there's just more than one.
Let's hold on just for a second, because I actually was in a conversation earlier today with somebody, and we were talking. I said the first round, and they're like, "This is the second round." I was like, I don't care. It's still the first round.
That was when we were all sitting up in the room. That when you guys were doing your project, we were having the conversation, and I was like, "It's technically considered a second round." We were all like, "Yeah, no, they're all playing games."
Yeah,
it's the field of 64, whatever.
All right, Steve, go ahead and continue with your region.
I picked Louisville over Davidson. That was a successful pick for me. I picked Colorado State over Murray State in the 6 and 11. I got Marquette beating BYU. Or Iona. I don't know who won that, actually. So BYU won it. All right, fantastic. I picked Virginia. I picked Virginia over Florida, and then I have Missouri beating Norfolk State. Then in the third round, back up to the top, I've got Michigan State beating Memphis, Louisville beating Long Beach State, which is a fictional matchup, but Louisville winning nonetheless. Then I have Marquette beating Colorado State, and then Missouri advancing past Virginia. And then in the regional semifinals, Michigan State will advance to play Missouri, and then I have Michigan State winning the West bracket.
All right, Vince, why don't you take us through your region?
All right, mine's a little screwy right now, so if I mess something up, I need to fix it because my bracket got left at home by Billy. So I'm going off my ESPN bracket, which is some of the picks. Most of the picks are very similar. Some of them I'm looking at it going, this is why I picked it at 1 o'clock in the morning. But
all I'm saying is on that, you can't have 2 brackets.
Yeah, I have like 4 brackets, man. So
you can't be doing that.
No. The more brackets you have, the less importance each bracket has. So it's like it takes away from the real meaning of it. I have 1 bracket, and I will stand beside that bracket until I start to lose.
Starting off, I have Michigan State winning against Long Island. Then I picked Memphis over St. Louis, New Mexico over Long Beach State. I am not sure why everybody was picking Long Beach State, or that New Mexico is one of the ones that they were saying could be a potential upsetter coming up later on. Louisville over Davidson, Murray State over Colorado State, Marquette over BYU. I have Virginia over Florida for the simple fact that I hate Florida. And Missouri over Norfolk State, Michigan over Memphis. Then I've got Louisville over New Mexico. Then I have Murray State in an upset over Marquette. Marquette's one of those Big East teams that I just don't like. They're one of those that have been so up and down this season. I think Murray State pulls off that upset.
That's a real quick, just correction, by the way. That's the Louisville High School Leopards, not Louisville. Just in case anyone was confused by that.
Yeah.
I was very confused when I first did this.
And then I have Missouri over Virginia in the next round. Going into the next round, I wanted to pick Louisville, and I just couldn't because they've killed me the last 2 years. So Michigan State. Yeah, Michigan State killed me. I have to pick Michigan State for that. Murray State loses to Missouri, so I have Michigan State and Missouri, and I have Missouri winning. I just don't see Michigan State going out into the Final Four.
All right, and before I make my pick for that region, Jesse, why don't you go ahead and take us through your region?
Well, my region, which I might add, is perfect so far. I'm sure I've already said that, but I'll just drop that bomb on you again. Michigan State, I got them kind of running table here. First, of course, taking out winning their first round matchup. 1 seed always beats the 16. I've got St. Louis over Memphis. Honestly, I think that St. Louis brings a little bit more to the table. A little bit. Once you get out to those teams in the smaller conferences and get a little bit older, have a coach who needs to prove something, I think you got a combination here for a team that can at least win 1 game in the tournament. New Mexico, Long Beach State called the Lobos on that one. Louisville against Davidson. As much as it pains me to pick the Cardinals, I did pick them because they're much better than Davidson. And Murray State, Colorado State also picked the Racers. They won that game as well. Picked Marquette to beat BYU, which they did by 20. Have Florida over Virginia. Honestly, I think once you get towards the middle teams of the SEC and the middle teams of the ACC, the separation isn't quite as apparent as it is at the top of the 2 leagues. I think the Gators are much better than the Cavaliers. I think that's going to play out. Missouri also has them beating Norfolk State. That kind of leads with some interesting matchups. I really was underwhelmed with the entire field this year. There are no teams to me in this field that just look like national champions except for Kentucky. And that's not even speaking as a Kentucky fan, but we'll get to that later.
But was just agreed. I'm sitting there looking at this thing going, there's really no clear-cut favorite here looking at this thing.
Yeah, there is no clear-cut favorite.
I would have picked Syracuse, but we'll get to that later.
I enjoy the fact that Jesse is underwhelmed by the entire field. No, all 64. You do not impress Jesse Meade.
Hey, it takes a lot to impress me. I got to tell you, I have high standards.
Billy and I have been trying for 3.5 years, and it's still not working.
But at least to the second round, the true second round, some matchups there. Michigan State, St. Louis. Obviously, I don't think St. Louis is going to have a shot against Michigan State. This is a team that won the tournament of what I believe is the best overall basketball conference in the country in the Big Ten. So the Spartans moving on. Got New Mexico beating Louisville because I just can't pick Louisville that many times back-to-back. Plus, I really just don't think they're that great. I think New Mexico's got a shot here. I think they can do it. Murray State and Marquette. This is the first kind of big upset. I think Murray State has the ability to go deep. Not necessarily that they're going to be more talented than the teams they're going to play on a round-by-round basis in the NCAA tournament, but a team just doesn't have the run that Murray State does and not have the skills to be able to get far in the tournament. So I think the Racers are going to beat Marquette as well. At Florida and Missouri, I also went with Missouri on that one. Setting up two matchups, Michigan State and New Mexico. Michigan State, I think, will actually run the table on New Mexico as well to get themselves into the Elite Eight. Murray State and Missouri. A lot of people went Missouri to get to the Elite Eight. I'm going with Murray State, where they will get to Michigan State. The Cinderella story will be out. Could they have the one-loss season? All of that will be great discussion until I think they get absolutely hammered by Michigan State in the Elite Eight, and the Spartans go to the Final Four.
All right, thanks, Jesse. And as for my West region, I got Michigan State over Long Island University, Brooklyn. I got Memphis over St. Louis, New Mexico over Long Beach State, Louisville over Davidson. I had Colorado State over Murray State because you look at some of the teams that they played and beat this year. They beat New Mexico. They beat San Diego State. They beat a number of quality opponents that are in the tournament this year, but they fell up short today. I have Marquette over BYU, Florida over Virginia, and Missouri over Norfolk State. My true second-round matchups, Michigan State versus Memphis. I went with the Spartans. You got Draymond Green up there. He does a great job for the Spartans, and I think they're just too big inside for Memphis to handle. Louisville, New Mexico, I got Louisville beating the Lobos. It's just one of those things. It's much like last year. It's harder to win the Big East tournament when you have to play 5 games like Louisville did. Although I don't think they actually played 5 games, but nonetheless, you run through the Big East tournament like Louisville did, like you kind of did last year, you're going to have success throughout the tournament. So I got them advancing onto the Sweet 16. Have Marquette beating Colorado State, and Missouri toppling Florida to go on to the Sweet 16. Michigan State and Louisville in the regional semifinals. I got Louisville upsetting the Spartans, and then I got Missouri beating Marquette. And then in the regional finals, I got Missouri taking out Louisville and advancing to the Final Four. So, you got something you want to say, Jesse?
No. I'll leave the arguments for the end because I have a feeling that it's your show. I don't want to mess with your format. I'll leave the arguments for the end.
All right. Now, before we go on to the next one, since we still have a couple minutes here, who is one team from this region that's still in it that you think could make a run to the Final Four?
I'm gonna go with New Mexico because New Mexico is one of those teams. They're a sneaky team. A lot of people were saying that they're undervaluing them, and then they started talking them up. But all of a sudden, and I remember their coach coming on saying, "Well, let's say undervalued when they were on an interview, so that way we can come in undervalued against Michigan State and actually produce something." So I think New Mexico might be a team to look out for. They're fast, and they're one of those teams that you may not expect at all because they're a 5 seed. They're right out of that. They're right underneath those teams where the teams that come out for those championships that have won the championships. They're right underneath there, so they could probably make a good move and at least make a bit of a surprising run.
Steve?
Statistically, I am forced to pick Missouri. They are statistically the team that will advance to the Final Four.
Ryan?
I think I'm going to go with my Final Four team, Missouri, actually, just for the fact that, other than statistics, because Steve knows nothing but numbers and hating baseball.
Well, just for the record, though, I do have Michigan State going to the Final Four, not Missouri.
Yeah, but
I have a heart.
That's true. I love their backcourt. I think Kim English and Marcus Dixon are the best 1-2 tandem of guards in the entire tournament. They're amazing three-point shooters, and they can take it to the basket. I mean, I think they're really experienced. This is their year to make some kind of run.
Jesse, how about you?
I just can't go with Steve. He's the Billy Bean of the NCAA tournament bracket over there. I just don't think that pure statistics are going to get you where you want to go, especially Vegas. Vegas tends to overvalue and undervalue teams by a lot. Money makes people think crazy things sometimes. Again, the West bracket. Honestly, like the more I look at the West bracket, the more I look at it as the weakest of the brackets. There's just not a whole lot going on here. You got Murray State, but I can't really say it would be not trendy of me to pick a Murray State that they could go on a run. I mean, the team's only lost one game. But again, when you look at the field, when it's the field against Michigan State just has so much more talent, so much more size and experience than the rest of the field. It's hard for me to pick against the Spartans.
I think that the matchup, if it does happen, will be in the Sweet 16, Michigan State, Louisville. Louisville gets past them. They could have an easy run onto the Final Four if they're able to get past Missouri. But, Louisville, Missouri, and not Missouri, New Mexico are the two teams that I think really could make a run out of the West. As I fix the sound effects.
Good job.
I was able to figure it out.
Score.
Let's move on now to our Midwest regions, where North Carolina is the number 1 seed, Kansas is number 2, number 3 Georgetown, number 4 Michigan. Why don't we start with Jesse this time around? Jesse, take us through your Midwest region.
I like this region a lot more competitiveness in this one, I think. I think you'll see a lot less landslide or, blowout matchups in this region. Starting off with the 116 matchup, UNC and Vermont. And again, shouldn't have to explain myself for picking UNC over Vermont. Creighton and Alabama. Again, this one's hard to call. The 8-9 is always a toss-up. Alabama is one of those teams in the SEC. As a person who watches Kentucky basketball obsessively, Alabama's one of those teams every year that them and Vanderbilt, you hate playing them just because even if they're not good, they find ways to win and at least advance themselves a little bit. So I'll give them a token win for this round. I have them over Creighton. Temple and USF. Again, this is a matchup that it's a 5 and a 12, not one that I think is going to be very competitive. I think the Owls are going to get that one. Michigan and Ohio. I'm sure many people fondly recall Ohio being Georgetown a couple years ago. I don't think it's going to happen in this one. Michigan's a very good team. I think the Wolverines will win that matchup. San Diego State, NC State. San Diego State's one of those teams that people need to keep an eye on. Way out west, they have a very good team. They can make a run much like they did not too long ago. I have them over NC State. Georgetown and Belmont. Georgetown, perennial power. I think they will take care of business against Belmont. St. Mary's and Purdue. This one was hard. I wanted to pick St. Mary's. I think a lot of people are picking Purdue just because they may not know too much about St. Mary's. They don't get a whole lot of coverage. Gonzaga usually dominates all the press of that conference, but I had to go with Purdue in the end. I honestly think Boilermakers are a better team. Kansas and Detroit, I think Kansas is going to smoke Detroit. UNC leaves us with UNC and Alabama. North Carolina is the team I've gotten to see play quite a bit this year. And I think they're way, way, way better than anything that Alabama can bring to the table. A whole lot of talent on this UNC team, a whole lot of NBA talent on this UNC team. I think they're going to beat Alabama. Temple and Michigan. Michigan wins this game. Again, Michigan's a great team. They honestly could be a Final Four team if they play their chips right. I have them beating Temple. San Diego State and Georgetown. I'm going to go with the Hoyas. They've had some disappointing tournament runs lately. I think they get that turned around this year. San Diego State presents a good threat, but not enough, I think, for Georgetown. Kansas and Purdue. KU is going to run all over Purdue, I think, as well. Even the Boilermakers, again, are a dangerous team from a very good conference. Kansas is amazingly good, and I think they beat Purdue. UNC and Michigan. Honestly, looking at UNC and Michigan is a tough call. North Carolina's gotten upset a couple times. Michigan has had a couple opportunities to prove itself, to take control of the Big Ten. They just never quite could do it. I think they can get an upset here. I mean, when you look at North Carolina and what they do on a game-to-game basis and how the couple games that they have lost, I think Michigan matches up very favorably against North Carolina. I think they can get the win. I have Michigan moving on to my Elite Eight. Georgetown and Kansas, this is a great NCAA tournament matchup. Two teams that are in the tournament every year, Elite Eight, Sweet 16 contenders every year, and I think they'll go right at it. I think Kansas wins this one, though, leaving me with Kansas and Michigan in the Elite Eight. Kansas, I think, is way better than Michigan, and that's saying a lot because Michigan was the number 3 team in the Big Ten this year. I think Kansas will run away from Michigan in this one and get themselves into a matchup in the Final Four against Michigan State.
All right. Why don't you go ahead and take us through your region there, Ryan?
All right. So, for my region starting off, Carolina over Vermont. Pretty simple pick, like Jesse said. I have Creighton over Alabama. Doug McDermott averages 24 points a game. He's an amazing power down in the post. I like him a lot with Creighton. I have South Florida over Temple, and I had South Florida before they even beat Cal in the play-in game, or the first round, excuse me, if we're going to be politically stupidly correct with this one. I had South Florida. I watched a couple of their games in the Big East tournament, in the Big East this season, and the Big East tournament, and they have a lot of talent. So I have South Florida there.
Ryan's like the hipster of NCAA basketball. I had them before they beat USF.
That's true. I was watching that game while I was wearing my
Before they were
sunglasses
cool.
in Starbucks, drinking my coffee. My heart wants to pick the Bobcats over the team up north, but statistics say I have to pick Michigan. They're a very good basketball team, as sad as it makes me to say that. I have NC State over San Diego State. C.J. Leslie's a really good guard, and I think NC State can pull off the upset here, even with as good of a ball team as San Diego State has. Georgetown over Belmont. They're a power every year. I mean, I think they have a great team. Purdue and St. Mary's is a tough matchup, but I think Robbie Hummel's going to finally show up this season after his great season 2 years ago, and I have Purdue over St. Mary's in this one. And then Kansas over Detroit. Kansas is just too good for a lot of teams. That brings me to my second round, which is Carolina versus Creighton. I have UNC coming out with that one with a win. They're very talented. They're so athletic and so fast that a lot of teams can't match up with them. South Florida, Michigan. I have Michigan over South Florida in this one. Michigan did have a share for the Big Ten regular season title. I think they're a very good team, and they could make a little bit of a run. NC State, Georgetown. I have Georgetown again in this one. Henry Sims is a really good defender, and Georgetown's defense is so ridiculously good that I cannot go with them. So then Purdue and Kansas as the last matchup in the second round. I have Kansas rolling over Purdue because they're too good inside. My Sweet 16 starts with North Carolina and Michigan. I have Carolina winning this one pretty favorably. I think Carolina is a really good basketball team. And then Georgetown, Kansas. This was a tough pick because Kansas is a very high-powered offense and Georgetown is a shutdown defense. But I like the Jayhawks in this game because they're so good, and some of their losses have been close all year long. One of them, in fact, to my favorite Buckeyes. And then my Elite Eight matchup is Carolina versus Kansas. I have UNC winning over Kansas in that one. Just the athleticism. If they get John Henson back for that game and later in the tournament, that brings their post presence back a little bit more, and I think Carolina can go to the Final Four.
All right, Steve.
All right. Well, in the obviously the North Carolina, I don't even know who won that game. UNC is going on. Creighton, Alabama. Alabama, obviously, I've got over Creighton. Well, I guess it's not really that obvious, but if I've never heard of your school, then I'm generally not going to pick you to win. Although it is weird though because I generally don't like to pick teams and double.
No one ever heard of Butler. Look what they've done the last 2 years.
Well,
Boom.
I'm saying myself personally. I never said I was good at picking brackets. This takes me back.
There's some truth.
This takes me back to the Division III football playoff bracket when I picked Salisbury to beat Wisconsin Whitewater in the third round.
That was brilliant.
I am not good. I do not have a good history of picking brackets in this show, but I will stand.
Steve, Creighton is blue. Oh yeah, see now look what I just did.
I did pick Alabama either way.
Uniforms aren't too bad on Creighton either.
That's true. That's true. Maybe I'll just pick next year. I'll just pick on who has the best uniforms. Just flip a coin at a time.
I'll just email you my list.
Really? Did I do that? I have USF over Temple. Did they? I think, unless Billy filled this in wrong. Really, Billy? Is this my pick?
I'm pretty sure it said Temple.
Billy's no. You put USF over Temple. You mean?
Oh yeah, I'm pretty sure you put USF.
I just love that. Really?
Really? I did that?
I'm pretty sure.
Did they? Are they in it? Did USF beat?
Yeah, they.
Yeah.
Okay.
Tell you what,
well,
Steve. We will check after the show, and if it is wrong, I will correct it.
Were you
Well,
not
I hope
listening
it's
to me? 'Cause
right.
I picked USF.
I honestly kind of fell asleep for a little bit. No, if it wasn't that you were disinterested. I just haven't-
No. You can just continue now.
No, I've only gone to bed the last 2 out of 4 days.
Steve,
I'm very tired.
Steve, just continue.
Okay, Brian's mad at me. I don't want to start a vendetta. He's sitting right next to me. He's bigger than me. Anyway, I got Michigan over Ohio. Yeah, Michigan's definitely, like everyone said here, definitely a Big Ten powerhouse. Not quite able to knock Ohio State off the perch, but should not have a challenge with Ohio. I've got NC State upsetting San Diego State. I think it's one of those weird statistical ones where 11s randomly can upset 6s, I think. I hope so, because that's who I picked. Georgetown over Belmont shouldn't require too much explanation. Purdue over St. Mary's. The more I look at this, the more I am seeing a little bit of a Big Ten bias, and I'm glad that Jesse said that he thinks that the Big Ten is the best basketball conference because I seem to be going that way, so hopefully that's the case. Kansas should take care of Detroit. I think, statistically in general, number 2s have only ever lost like 4 times in the first round anyway, so that's not really a big deal. Going back up to the second round here, UNC Alabama. I've got UNC taking care of the Alabama team. Crimson Tide. There we go. I knew I could get it eventually. I have Michigan knocking off my underdog USF. Then I have NC State. No, I have NC State versus Georgetown. I have Georgetown advancing in that one. And I have Kansas over Purdue. So never mind. I guess I don't have that much of a Big Ten bias. My bracket's a mess this year. This is terrible. Ugh. If I go on to win, I'll be extremely excited, though. UNC versus Michigan. I've got UNC moving on. Michigan is a good basketball team. But I think North Carolina is a much better basketball team. Really? All right, Georgetown, Kansas moving on to play against UNC. Honestly, a lot of people were saying Kansas to be UNC, or like some people were, but I'm saying UNC, and they're actually my favorites. Well, I don't want to ruin that. Never mind. Just go on. You know what? I need a mulligan for this show.
So,
it's not a good start for that. I need a mulligan for that region of the bracket. That was a terrible explanation of my choices.
Yeah,
I don't
pick know
up
if
the
I
pace.
picked this guy or not, but
So Steve, who'd you have coming out of the Midwest?
UNC,
I
I think.
Wait,
It was either.
Wait a second.
It was
what?
either UNC, Temple, USF, or San Diego State. I'm not sure. One of those 5 teams will win. I'm pretty sure.
Brilliant.
All right, so with this bracket, I'm a big believer in what you do in a past tournament will basically foreshadows what you're going to do in this one. And a prime example is Pittsburgh losing twice as a number 1 seed to a seed it never should have lost to. Granted, it was on a last-second Hail Mary shot, but still shouldn't have happened. Happened twice. They're out of the tournament. Not even in it this year. I feel like that play declines it down. So this bracket, this section in particular, really I think plays into that. So I have UNC beating Vermont, Creighton beating Alabama for the simple fact that they're a number 8 seed. As a toss-up, I'm going to go with the other higher seed. I'm sure they know the the selectors know what they're thinking. That's why they put them higher. Temple over USF, number 5. Temple's a very good team. They're going to be moving to the Big East next year, so it should be interesting to see what happens with them. Michigan over Ohio. I have San Diego State over NC State. NC State really had to make a gigantic push at the end to even get into this tournament. I think San Diego State wins. They did fairly decent last year. I think it carries over. Georgetown beats Belmont. I have Purdue over St. Mary's. That was a hard one for me, picking back and forth, because St. Mary's just beat Gonzaga to win their conference, but Purdue has Robbie Hummel, and we all know when Robbie Hummel gets going, he's one of those guys who we don't know what happens, but he just makes teams better. Kansas over Detroit. So now I've got UNC over Creighton. Then I've got Michigan beating Temple. I think Michigan's one of those teams, beats up on teams that are lower than them and does not always play very well against teams that are better than itself. San Diego State over Georgetown. Georgetown is one of those teams, particularly in recent memory, that have had struggled in the tournament once they've gotten past that first round. I think San Diego State wins. And my other upset pick right now is Purdue over Kansas. Again, Robbie Hummel making those big plays. Kansas, when Bill Self was coach, they've criminally underachieved in these past few years, the only exception being 2008. But if you look at it, they've had so many opportunities to come in and make these plays, and they just underachieve. And I see Purdue getting an upset. UNC over Michigan. Michigan, again, does not generally do well when they have to play up to their competition. They got destroyed by Ohio State. Granted, they beat them at their own place, but in other instances, like Jesse, you mentioned, they've had a chance to try and jump forward, and they couldn't. I've got Purdue over San Diego State, making that run up there, being Big Ten, just too much better than San Diego State. And North Carolina goes into the Final Four against and over Purdue. I think North Carolina is just too athletic, and North Carolina in the past is one of those teams where if they're in that tournament these past few years, you've seen them get to the finals or to the Final Four. And the only way for them not to get there is that they have to be completely out of the tournament. So I see UNC making it to the Final Four.
All right, and for me, coming out of the Midwest, I got North Carolina over Vermont. I got Creighton over Alabama, Temple over South Florida, Michigan over Ohio, San Diego State over North Carolina State, Georgetown over Belmont, Purdue over St. Mary's, and Kansas over Detroit. And then in my third round, quote unquote, This is where it gets pretty crazy for me. I got North Carolina over Creighton. I got Temple beating Michigan. Temple scores a lot of points. They play good defense. They shoot the ball well. They move the ball well. And they can rebound the ball very well. I think that Temple is a team that could possibly knock off Michigan if they can shut down Tim Hardaway and Trey Burke. I got San Diego State beating Georgetown. Georgetown, one of those teams, they can't have the capabilities of making deep runs into the tournament, but I think San Diego State, this is the year that they would finally break out of the shell and advance deep into the tournament. And then I got Kansas over Purdue. Then in the regional semifinals, I got North Carolina over Temple. And then I got San Diego State over Kansas. Again, that's about the time where Kansas really kind of falls apart in the second, third round once they get to the Sweet 16. And I think that San Diego State is able to knock them off that horse again this year, which would set up a North Carolina, San Diego State Elite Eight with North Carolina coming out on top. So a lot of crazy things can happen in this bracket. I think personally that this is probably one of the best regions, probably the best region out of this bracket. Does anyone want to argue with that?
Yeah, it's probably the most interesting and most intriguing out of all of them. I would have said the East would have been the best, but then we'll get to that in a little bit.
Meh.
Yeah, I would. I'd say the South, just for the caliber of teams that are there. Like, I mean, you have the defending national champs as a 9 seed, and then Baylor, Duke, and Indiana, 2, 3, 4. Well, yeah, in some kind of order. But I just think there's too much talent in the South to be denied, really.
You look overall, though, it's just not. There's nothing here that says you goes, yes, this is going to be that team. If I had to pick.
All right, moving on. East region now. Syracuse is the number 1 seed. Ohio State's number 2 seeds. So, Steve, why don't you start us off and take us through your East region?
I would love to. The interesting thing is that Syracuse narrowly beat UNC Asheville today. I did pick that correctly, but it kind of makes me wary of the rest of my picks because I have Syracuse advancing all the way to the Elite Eight. So, I mean, maybe they'll respond. Maybe it was just kind of a fluke, but a little surprising. Anyway, so I got Syracuse moving on. I have Kansas State over a Southern Miss. Don't really have an explanation for that. Vanderbilt over Harvard. Yeah, Harvard's good. I just cannot support an Ivy League team to make it against a reputable opponent. I don't know. I'm not falling into the Linsanity halo effect here. Wisconsin over Montana. Go Big Ten. I've got Texas over Cincinnati. It's weird because I kind of feel like I used to kind of feel like the Big East was like the SEC of basketball, and I would just automatically pick Big East teams to win. But I'm going to hand it to Billy's Longhorns and say Texas is going to get the upset here and beat the Bearcats. I got Florida State beating St. Bonaventure. Not a whole lot of explanation needed for that one. West Virginia going on to beat Gonzaga. That I think will be a pretty decent upset. I mean, they have
currently the score is West Virginia 22, Gonzaga 40.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, you know what? I'm got to stand by my pick. I like West Virginia's basketball team. I just looked at that and I was like, man, they lost in 13 games. It's kind of ridiculous. But either way, I think that West Virginia is going to pull this one out. Yep, I think that still. Ohio State over Loyola. So that'll be my first round right there. As it works out, Syracuse versus Wisconsin. After what I've seen, I missed. No,
You skipped
I skipped around. I knew. So I've got Syracuse versus Kansas State. Syracuse going on to win that one. Again, after what I saw, I probably would think of picking Kansas State over Syracuse, but regardless, I've got Syracuse moving on. Vanderbilt, Wisconsin moving on. Go Big Ten. Texas over Florida State over Texas in that one, and then West Virginia, Ohio State. I've got Ohio State moving on, and then into the next round, Syracuse, Wisconsin. I have Syracuse moving on. Florida State, Ohio State. Buckeyes moving.
It's tough.
Well, even before that, though, like I look at this and statistically, I'm going with my thing. I'm like, Ohio State's going to go. But I just feel like I've been let down. Even this season, like I feel like they just lose games they shouldn't lose.
They did beat Florida State pretty handily earlier in the year. So
yeah, but
that's an indicator. But again,
it's an indicator that they should win this game, meaning they should lose this game by Ohio State logic. But okay, Ohio State, Syracuse. I actually have Ohio State going on to win their region and go on to the Final Four.
All right, Jesse, why don't you take us through your East region?
No, the East is, again, I agree with the order we're going in here. The East is, I think, the second best of the regions. Looking at it, Syracuse, UNC Asheville, picked Syracuse, and even knowing that they were without Fab Melo, a loss of one player, one still not lose to a 16 seed, and they came very close. But
it came to a referee blown call of losing
well,
that game.
and by I say very close, yes, I mean that it came to like 5 blown calls and a horribly officiated game to win. As much as I dislike Jim Boeheim.
Were you talking about the last Mount Union women's basketball game? I'm sorry.
Oh yeah, I heard wonderful stories about that one too.
Yeah.
But you know, I could probably rant for the last 30 minutes of the show just on Jim Boeheim alone. But I'll keep my thoughts.
Please spare us that for another. Spare us that for another call, Jesse.
Kansas State, Southern Miss. Kansas State's a great team. I'm happy that I picked them to beat Southern Miss. Vanderbilt over Harvard. Vanderbilt again is a great SEC team, very scrappy. Wasn't buying into the Harvard mini hype, I guess, as it were, which I think, as Steve already mentioned, was kind of a byproduct of Jeremy Lin. Hitting it big in the NBA. Wisconsin and Montana. Wisconsin way better than Montana. I know a couple people that were picking Montana in this game. I didn't see that at all, and it played out that way. Cincinnati and Texas. I went with Cincy after that great Big East championship tournament run. That's enough momentum to propel you for at least one game in the NCAA tournament, especially against a Texas team that's been pretty underwhelming for most of the season. Florida State, St. Bonaventure. Seminoles are a good team. And to sound much like the hipster earlier, we had I was on Florida State before other people were on Florida State, before that ACC tournament. They have great players. They have great down-low players. They don't score a lot of points. They won't overpower you with points, but they don't have to. They play good defense. We also have Gonzaga, West Virginia. I think West Virginia. I picked West Virginia for that game. Gonzaga is currently smoking them at halftime, 40-22, like Vince mentioned. I thought West Virginia's size would be able to slow the game down a little bit. Obviously, that is not what's happening right now. Ohio State and Loyola went with Ohio State for obvious reasons, which leaves you to Syracuse and Kansas State. I think at this point, the loss of Fab Melo impacts Syracuse. Kansas State will win that game, I believe, advancing them to the Sweet 16. Vanderbilt and Wisconsin. I went with the Badgers in this one. Vanderbilt's a very good team, but Wisconsin is as well. And I think Vanderbilt got on a hot streak in the SEC tournament, but they're not consistently a good team. Wisconsin, even in the games that they lose, they're usually right in it there. Cincinnati, Florida State, again with the Seminoles for that one, beating Cincinnati. Had Ohio State beating West Virginia. So even if West Virginia goes down, hopefully it won't implode my bracket too bad. Kansas State and Wisconsin. Now I went with the Badgers in this one, and Florida State and Ohio State. Again, I know Ohio State had the win. But you know, there's just one thing that I've learned this year from Ohio State. There's a vast difference between the team that you might be in December and the team that you are in March. Ohio State has not evolved as a team from the beginning of this year. They're the same team that they were in December, and that is not a very good elite tier team. They're at the bottom of the elite teams in this tournament. I don't think they win this game against Florida State. And it pains me to say that. I'm a Ohio State fan, but this team this year just doesn't have the killer instinct. It's like a team full of LeBron James, if you follow me.
Ow! Whoa.
There's no killer instinct on this Ohio State team. I think
a
Florida
team full of LeBron James. Ouch.
Supreme talent, no killer instinct. Wisconsin, Florida State are the final matchup for the region for me. I think Florida State wins to get themselves a ticket to the Final Four.
All right, thanks, Jesse. Vince, take us through your East.
So, I was going to put Syracuse into the finals, and then Fab Melo got suspended, so that went down the drain. So I had to change myself up a little bit. So I have Syracuse winning against Asheville, although I was rooting for Asheville to win because it would have been awesome to see a 16 seed beat a 1 seed, and it should have happened. Even though it would have killed my bracket, I wouldn't have cared. It would have been amazing. Kansas State beating Southern Miss, kind of obvious. Kansas State is one of those teams that feels like they got snubbed of the 1 seed and they should have gotten one. Vanderbilt, I had them losing to Harvard, actually. I was one of those guys. I picked the 12-5 upset. I figured that would be the one place where it would happen. The major upset was going to be Harvard over Vanderbilt, Wisconsin over Montana. I had Cincinnati over Texas. And I had Florida State over St. B. And then I have West Virginia over Gonzaga. That looks like a terrible choice right now. And Ohio State over Loyola. And then I have Ohio State beating West Virginia. We're going to go straight up the bracket. I have Ohio State beating West Virginia. I think they've just got too much talent. Florida State over Cincy. I have Wisconsin over Harvard. And then I have Syracuse, Kansas State is going to be an interesting matchup. I think Syracuse pulls it out. They're one of those teams that even when they've lost it, they won 2 or 3 games without Melo, even though they struggled mightily. I still think they can pull this game out. They're one of those teams that thrives in close games. So Syracuse, Wisconsin, I say Syracuse once again. This could be the problem where the bigs come in. Wisconsin has a lot of size on their team, can get a lot of those rebounds, but I still think Syracuse pulls out a close one. Ohio State over Florida State. I think Ohio State really uses Sullinger in there. Florida State, again, their past is known as a giant killer, as an upset specialist, but that really has not been the case inside the tournament. That's really been outside during the ACC. So if we're going to go with this, I'm going to ride what's happened in the past. I'm going to go with Ohio State. I have Syracuse over Ohio State. Ohio State is not one of those teams I see making the Final Four. They just don't have that it factor. I think Syracuse barely squeaks by and barely makes it in.
Ryan.
All right, so for my East region, I start off Syracuse narrowly over UNC Asheville today. Even though it would have killed my bracket too, I would have loved it. I was rooting for the underdog the whole time. I had Kansas State over Southern Miss. A good pick. I had Vandy over Harvard. It was tough originally for me, but Vanderbilt is a really good team, so picked them. Wisconsin over Montana. Like Jesse said, the hype for Montana was really weird. I don't really know where it came from.
Didn't that it caught me off guard. I didn't know what the deal with that was.
Yeah, I watched bracketology for a couple hours on Sunday night, and everybody was hyping up Montana, and they got beat by nearly 30 today. So, sucks to be an ESPN person right now.
Second time they've gotten destroyed in the first round.
I have Cincinnati over Texas. Texas barely made it into the tournament this year, and Cincinnati really went on fire after that brawl with Xavier. Florida State over St. Bonaventure, not much to say there.
It's nothing like a good brawl to get you going.
Exactly. They both went in completely different directions. Even though
Xavier plummeted.
Even though Xavier made the tournament, they both went in different directions, and Cincy benefited from it. I, too, have West Virginia over Gonzaga. I watched them a lot this year, and even though the 13 losses were there, I thought they were a good basketball team. I still think they are, and I still think there's hope, but not a lot left right now. And then I have the Buckeyes over Loyola, Maryland. Second round, Cuse versus Kansas State. I have Syracuse coming out, even though Kansas State's a lot more physical and especially Syracuse without Fab Melo, but I still think Syracuse prevails. Vandy over Wisconsin on this one. I think Vanderbilt's an experienced team. This is their time. Wisconsin's tough, but they have not been able to finish a lot of games, both in conference play and earlier in the season. So I think Vanderbilt's got that one. Florida State over Cincinnati. Florida State this is probably their time to make a run. They have a lot of momentum from the ACC tournament and upsetting both Duke and Carolina in the same season. I think they have a good shot. And then I have the Buckeyes over the Mountaineers in the second round. Going on to the third round, Syracuse over Vanderbilt. That was a tough one for me because Vanderbilt is a really good team. They have good perimeter shooters and good guys to rebound in the post, especially without Fab Melo down there to go up against them as a physical presence. But I still think Syracuse wins that one based on experience. And then I have Ohio State over Florida State. A lot of people are swinging the momentum in favor of the Seminoles, but I still love the Buckeyes. Whenever they are on and William Buford plays like the senior leader that he is.
There's the key.
I mean, it's a neutral site, so technically they're still on the road, but I think Buford can play when he has his head in the game, and whenever he does, they're an unstoppable team. So I have them going up against Syracuse in the Elite Eight, and I have my Buckeyes prevailing over Syracuse with Sullinger beating out every post player that Syracuse has with the lack of Fab Melo.
All right, and then I'll finish it up with my East region. I had Syracuse over UNC Asheville, K-State over Southern Miss, Vanderbilt over Harvard, Wisconsin over Montana, Cincinnati over Texas. You know, Texas is one of those teams, they really, in my opinion, they just barely squeaked in. Jacobin Brown's been the one that's been leading that team. And with Cincinnati making their run in the Big East tournament, I just think that they're the all-around better team than Texas right now. So Texas is going to have to pull one out. Florida State over St. Bonaventure. I have West Virginia over Gonzaga. Last I checked, it was 42-24. So
46-26 Gonzaga right now with 17:43 left in the second.
So right now, West Virginia looking like that's going to let all of us down. Ohio State over Loyola. Second round, even before, this game was pretty tough for me to pick between Syracuse and K-State before Fab Melo went out. After he went out, it became that much easier. I think K-State prevails in that one. I'm looking at Jesse's bracket as I'm doing this.
All right.
But nonetheless, I'm pretty sure, I had the same picks as what Jesse did in that first round.
No sure worries. You did.
I did. All right, okay. So for my second round matchup, I got Syracuse over and K-State. I got K-State winning that one over Syracuse without Fab Melo. Vanderbilt, Wisconsin. I got Vanderbilt knocking off Wisconsin. I think that they have a lot of momentum on their side. I think they're peaking at the right time, just in time for the NCAA tournament. I think they advanced past the Badgers. I got Florida State over Cincinnati. I got Ohio State over West Virginia. Then in my Sweet 16 matchups, I got K-State and Vandy. I think Vandy pulls that out. They show that they match up pretty well with teams that are of K-State's caliber. I think they can pull that one out. And I hate to do it, but I think Florida State knocks off Ohio State just for the fact, like we talked about, Buford's got to be on. He's inconsistent for being the senior on this team. And I just think Ohio State's going to have their struggles once they get into that Sweet 16 against Florida State. Then in the Elite Eight, I got Vanderbilt and Florida State. I think Florida State wins it and advances on to the Final Four. And that will bring us now to the fourth and final region with Kentucky as number 1 seed. So, Vince, why don't you take us through your South region?
All right. Well, after seeing Western Kentucky storm back with 5 minutes to go, I was like, oh, that should be an interesting matchup. No, they are currently being crushed 78-50 with 6 minutes and 30 seconds left in the second quarter. Kentucky over Western Kentucky.
How are the unibrow?
Yeah, it's... Yeah, Kentucky's they're just too good right now. UConn over Iowa State. I think UConn has a little bit of gas left in there. They can get past Iowa State. I picked Wichita State over VCU. Looks like it's becoming a bad choice right now. VCU 41, Wichita State 31 with 15 minutes left in the second quarter. They could come back, but VCU, one of those teams, we saw them last year get to that Final Four when no one expected them to. Should be interesting to watch. Indiana over New Mexico State. Indiana, that's kind of obvious right there. Big Ten school. UNLV over Colorado. UNLV is a very good team, so don't underestimate them. Baylor over South Dakota State. Baylor leading 36-28 at halftime. Xavier over Notre Dame. I just don't like Notre Dame in general on principle, but at the same time, I think Xavier's just a better team than Notre Dame is. Notre Dame barely got in. I have Duke over Lehigh, however you say their name. They're still going to lose. So
it's Leahy.
I don't care. They're losing.
Can I get him out of there? Get him out of the studio.
Lehig, I believe, is the correct.
All right.
French.
They're going to lose, so it doesn't matter. Kentucky over UConn. I think Kentucky's too good. UConn, they do not have Kemba Walker. Indiana over Wichita State, and that's another obvious one. I think Indiana's just better. I have Baylor over UNLV. Baylor's one of those teams, if they catch fire, they can be unstoppable. They have some great players on that team. And I have Duke over Xavier, making it into the Sweet 16. Kentucky and Indiana, this will not be another repeat. Indiana barely won. Kentucky avenges that loss and gets into the Elite Eight. Baylor over Duke. I think Baylor, again, just catches fire and just streaks into there. Into the Elite Eight, Kentucky over Baylor. Putting my Final Four as Kentucky, Syracuse, Missouri, and UNC. And a funny little fact, numbers never lie, last 4 years, 3 number 1 seeds have made the Final Four. So, going to be interesting to see, and I think we see a repeat of that.
Ryan, go ahead and take us through your region.
Well, first, last year, VCU and Butler both made the Final Four.
Okay, so maybe it was before that. Well,
okay, yeah, I mean, I was thinking about that.
Yeah.
But, so for
you didn't know Butler was a 1 seed.
Oh, yeah, obviously.
Just in case.
The NCAA Selection Committee highly regards Horizon League teams.
Yep.
So I start out Kentucky over Western Kentucky. They are just dominating right now. I also have Connecticut over Iowa State. That's a really tough matchup for me because Iowa State had a really good season, but Connecticut is coming on in the Big East tournament like they did last year, so I think they have a little bit of momentum. I have the Wichita State Shockers over VCU. You know, everyone's still hyping up VCU, and yes, they are winning this game right now, but I think Wichita State could potentially pull it out because they have a really undervalued team, and they had a decently tough schedule in their non-conference, and they played very well this season. I have the Hoosiers over New Mexico State. Pretty simple. Big Ten team, a lot of talent. UNLV over Colorado. UNLV cannot be underlooked. They played very well against North Carolina early on in the season, and they've kept that kind of play going throughout the rest of the year, so that is a 6 seed that is something to watch for. Baylor over South Dakota State. Baylor's a very good team with a lot of NBA prospects, so I think they could pull that one out pretty easily. Notre Dame over Xavier. I think Notre Dame is just one of those teams. You know, Xavier, I'm basing my pick on the fact that Xavier completely went on the opposite end after that brawl, and they barely sneaked into the tournament as a 10 seed. And I kind of agree with what Doug Gottlieb said. He goes, who did they beat? You know, they're in the Atlantic 10, and they lost to Dayton. That Dayton is their only, high-priority win. So, I mean, I think Notre Dame can pull that one out. Duke over Lehigh, which I think is how you pronounce that, but I really still don't know.
Duke wins. Doesn't matter.
Yeah, Duke wins.
It's Lehig.
It's it's Hebrew, so let's be honest. I had second round. I have Kentucky over UConn. UConn's good, but I completely agree. No Kemba Walker, no leadership really. So Kentucky wins that one. I still have Wichita State over Indiana. I think that's my major upset in the South region, just because I think they're a team that was very underrated. Nobody really saw them play, and watching some of their highlights and seeing some of their players, they have a really good post presence in the front court, and I think they could match up very well with Indiana. Baylor over UNLV. Baylor's a really talented team, a lot of athleticism, and UNLV's tough, but Baylor pulls it out. Duke over Notre Dame, just because Duke is Duke. Even though I'm a Carolina fan, I think Duke pulls that one out. They have far too much talent. Kentucky against Wichita State in the Sweet 16. I have the Wildcats coming out of that one. Kentucky, even though they lost to Vanderbilt, in my mind, they're still fairly unbeatable because they're so talented. And the only thing that can help them through this entire tournament is that if Marcus Teague plays well at point guard as a freshman point guard, they're unstoppable because they have talent everywhere else. Duke is going to lose to Baylor in my Sweet 16 matchup because I think Baylor is just too athletic for Duke because Duke loves to shoot the perimeter, and the Plumlee brothers, all three of them, are going to get stopped in this game. So that brings me to my Elite Eight matchup of Kentucky against Baylor, and I think Kentucky is far too good because Anthony Davis is going to match up with Perry Jones III and dominate him in that game with his wingspan of 10 feet 11 inches, which I don't know if that's accurate or not, but he seems like he can stretch across the earth.
No, it's 15 feet.
You talking the unibrow or the arms?
Oh, that's very true.
Both,
yeah.
Nonetheless, Anthony Davis is a great shot blocker. That'll be a great matchup should it happen. Jesse, take us through your South region.
Well, the save us in the interest of times, I'm having Kentucky emerge. A shocker that the Kentucky guy picks it. Right now, I picked Wichita State to beat VCU. Baylor is another team that I have running deep. I think Xavier beats Notre Dame, but I only made that pick out of principle. Actually, I think Notre Dame will win that game, but I refuse to have a bracket when Notre Dame advances. I think Duke mops the floor with Xavier, which brings me all to the real matchups that are important. We have Kentucky and Indiana, Baylor and Duke. I think Kentucky and Indiana, great matchup, great storyline. I think Kentucky gets its business taken care of the second time around against the Hoosiers. Baylor and Duke, again, it's you couldn't have two different styles clashing in this game. You got Duke, who it seems like they're playing in the 1960s, just spot up jumpers and running the pick and roll. That didn't work. Let's pick and roll some more. Baylor, I think, has too much athleticism. I think they'll come out on top of that one. Too much size for Duke. That's the problem that Duke had in the ACC sometimes this year, where they were just outsized and way too much speed at times. Which leaves Kentucky and Baylor, which is an interesting matchup because Baylor, I think, will be easily the most athletic team that Kentucky's played all year, and one of the teams that can actually match up with Kentucky size-wise and keep up with them up and down the court. And which is it's a dangerous matchup for Kentucky as well. Being a team composed of freshmen, they can always do the traditional Kentucky thing under John Calipari, and that is choke it up and lose the game. But I think Kentucky wins that one and gets themselves into the Final Four in a region that the South that has a bunch of teams that could be Final Four teams. I mean, when you look at it, honestly, Duke, Baylor, Indiana, Kentucky, all these teams could legitimately get to the Final Four, and you have a couple teams that can make a run to get to the Final Four. A great region in the South.
All right, thanks, Jesse. And for me, for my South region, I got Kentucky and UConn, VCU and Indiana, UNLV and Baylor, and Notre Dame and Duke. I think Notre Dame is going to take care of Xavier. Tim Abramitis versus True Holloway is going to be one of the best matchups of point guards in this entire tournament. That's going to be a good game to watch between those two. Then I got Kentucky going up against Indiana in the Sweet 16, Baylor and Duke in the other part of that. Then I got Kentucky and Duke in the Elite Eight, and then I got Kentucky coming out of there and advancing on to the Final Four. So, Ryan, why don't you remind us of your Final Four and then who you got going to the championship game?
I didn't pick my South bracket yet.
Oh, sorry, Steve. Go ahead.
You didn't really pick your South bracket, to be fair.
Wow. Ow. Got burned.
Well, it depends on if you knew who
your South bracket, sir.
It depends on if you know who you're picked.
Shush. What is vitally important to my South bracket is Wichita State winning this game because I have them advancing all the way to the Sweet 16 against Kentucky. Really? I picked Wichita State to beat Indiana? What was I doing on this? This is ridiculous.
I think you were either asleep or you had just gotten back from a party.
I think
maybe
Billy. I honestly think that Billy may have written these things down wrong because this is ridiculous. Absolutely. I'll just skip ahead with my Sweet 16. Kentucky against Wichita State. Kentucky moves on. I have Baylor and Duke. Duke moves on. Then Kentucky versus Duke. I have Kentucky advancing to the South Regional National Semifinals.
All right. Now, Ryan, take us through your Final Four and into your national title game.
All right, so from the Southwest matchup, I have Kentucky against Mizzou, and I really like this matchup because down in the post, Kentucky is a little more dominant, but the backcourt of Missouri is so much better and so much more athletic, and they have a lot more experience as well. But I have the Wildcats coming out of that one, making it to the final. And from my East-Midwest matchup, it's the Buckeyes versus Carolina for me. And this was tough because, I think they're both very athletic teams, very good perimeter shooters. And then Sullinger against Zeller is going to be a fantastic matchup. But I have Carolina coming away with the victory in that one, making it to the final as well. Because this is their year, in my opinion, to make that near run. So I have Kentucky against North Carolina, and this is why I say near run, because I think Kentucky, even with their youth, there's so much talent on that team, and Calipari is going to get his first title victory as the Wildcats cut down the nets.
All right, Steve?
All right, so I've got Kentucky versus Michigan State. I've got Kentucky winning this one. I think that Michigan State has probably the best chance to make it out of that region. Missouri, I think they'd give it a good fight, but Kentucky, very good basketball team. Michigan State does not quite have it. Like we've said, in the Big Ten, Ohio State, I think, is clearly the best team in the Big Ten. Michigan State's right up there with them, but not good enough to beat Kentucky. So then I've got Ohio State versus the University of North Carolina on the other side, and unfortunately, I've got to pick away from the Buckeyes. Again, I barely have faith that they'll make it to the Final Four, so I really don't think they'll be able to beat a good UNC team. Are we doing championships now?
Yes.
I kind of wasn't paying attention when Ryan was picking.
Yeah.
I'm very tired.
He was
guys.
trying
I'm
to
sorry.
figure out his
I'm
bracket and
I was
why
trying
he picked
to
those.
decipher this.
He picked these last night when he didn't get any sleep. He's like, this guy looks cool.
I'm very tired.
Make it quick, sir.
So I've got Kentucky versus North Carolina. I literally do remember this. I literally picked North Carolina just because everyone picks Kentucky. I was like, everybody's going to pick. I'm just going to pick North Carolina.
All right, Vince.
For funsies.
All right, so I have Kentucky against Missouri. I think Kentucky's just a little too talented right there coming in. Missouri's going to give them a good fight. Another team that thought they should have gotten a number 1 seed. Going to be very interesting to see what happens there. I think Kentucky pulls that one out, though. Syracuse, North Carolina. North Carolina's just too long and lanky in too many different areas for Syracuse. And their magical run of, hey, we managed to pull out very crappy close games comes to an end. North Carolina, as I mentioned before, always seems to make it to these finals and wins. Not this time. Kentucky pulls it out and wins this matchup. I have this, since I have it on my ESPN bracket game, I have 63-57 Kentucky winning, and then 2 years later, the banner being taken away because Coach Calipari left right before the NCAA gets it for some sort of violation. So Kentucky wins and then loses their title in 2 years.
All right, Jesse?
Final Fours, Kentucky and Florida State. Michigan State and Kansas. Obviously, Kentucky playing Michigan State. I think this is the best coaching matchup that you'll see in the tournament, if it does happen this way, that is. But I think Kentucky, when it comes down to the finals, really it's the team that I think has the best rebounding and down-low presence. I think that belongs to Kentucky. I think they can, but they can also be able to run Michigan State off the court, generally speaking. Not saying they're going to smoke Michigan State by any means. So I think Kentucky wins that game as well. Florida State and Kansas. Again, tough game to call. Florida State, I think they have great size. I think they are on a great run in the ACC. Kansas is a ridiculously good team. I don't think Florida State quite has enough to get them over the edge, which sets up a Kansas and Kentucky rematch. Not a title game rematch, but just a rematch. If you remember Kentucky-Kansas a couple years ago, that was a crazy game. In the tournament. I think Kentucky wins 78-72, and I think they get the banner, and I think they hang on to it for at least longer than 2 years.
Maybe 3?
Maybe 3. Maybe 3.
All right, and then my Final Four, I have Kentucky versus Missouri on one side, Florida State versus North Carolina on the other side. I got Missouri beating Kentucky, and then Florida State beating North Carolina in that big rematch, and I think Florida State goes on to win the national title.
Interesting. I want to hear Jesse's. Jesse is, for those of you guys that don't know, Jesse is our uniform uniform man. He knows what the best uniforms are. So, Jesse, give us our final four of uniforms. And who would win in the uniform?
You just dropped that on me.
I did. Uniform battle. Who would win
I'll
in the
tell you who would
championship?
lose the playing game of uniforms. That'd be the Baylor neon yellow ones. That was disgusting. Whoa. Final four of uniforms. I'll tell you what, Kentucky's got great uniforms. I think I would have them in the Final Four, not necessarily by the same regions. I think your Final Four would be Kentucky, UNC, Duke, and probably Long Beach State. I was digging the bright yellows.
All right.
Those were
You
pretty
hate
cool.
yellow.
Right, that's what I'm saying. That's why I was surprised, but it's
That's
kind
the
of
upset
similar to Golden State's uniforms. You know, the city. I love the beach. I love that how they worked that out. But you know, overall, I think you can't top the two classics. That being North Carolina and Duke. They would have to meet in the finals. North Carolina, baby blue. That's a winner, no matter what sport you're playing.
That was pretty cool. But we are out of time here on Radio Zone Weekly. We thank you for joining us, and we thank Jesse again for calling in and joining us for our bracket show. And we hope that you will join us next week right here on Radio Zone Weekly, same time, same place, on the radio voice of Mount Union, WRMU 91.1.